getting the right mindset that if you aspire to do something, if you put a goal to something, then it's a matter of just going and achieving it. And it's the sheer hard work that can get you there.
This is Property Investory, where we talk to successful property investors to find out more about their stories, mindset, and strategies. I'm Tyrone Shum, and in this episode, we're speaking with property strategist Vaibhav Rastogi. His personal journey has taken him from being a student of architecture in India to a computer programmer in Singapore to managing $2 billion of funds in Australia. Tune in as he's going to tell us how he built a $5 million plus property portfolio from scratch. Having achieved his own financial freedom, Rastogi now directs his energy into developing strategies to help others achieve theirs.
I am a property strategist and a buyer's agent from Get Rare Properties. I help people achieve financial freedom by getting them into the right property for the right reasons. I mean, I'm a big fan of getting the right strategy, and it's probably coming from my own financial background. I have been a fund manager of funds of $2 billion.
Wow.
And the key thing was to get the right strategy. So once we have the right strategy, then we can go for the right location and then the right property. And then, of course, if you can get it for the right price, that's a bonus. So I have used that strategy to build my own portfolio of $5 million plus, which is a positively geared portfolio, which I built it from the scratch. And I'm very proud of that. And I am now helping others to achieve something similar, much better, much quicker, and with much more ease.
Some people have the perception that a person who's achieved financial freedom can be found relaxing at the beach all day. But Rastogi shares with us the details on how he fills his day with intentional productivity.
I'm actually very big on data, and I tend to capture a lot of data points through different sources, and I try to manipulate them or rather contemplate them. And so that's the kind of a desk job. But as you know, property is all about people and the sentiment. So I'm actually more around on the road, not as much as I would like in these COVID-19 environment. So it's all about Zoom, phone, emails, with my deep network of real estate agents, trying to understand, going through lots of media, lots of reports out there on the council, trying to go to the source of the information, as in like lots of statistical sites and the economic forecast sites. And coming from the research background, that's actually ingrained in my mindset that we have to do a lot of research. So that's probably I'm doing and all the time, of course. And then the part of it is like understanding the client stories. There's always a story behind the prospects and the clients. So trying to get into it, understand what their whys are, like what are they trying to achieve, and then how I can actually potentially help by providing them that kind of a property portfolio that can lead them the life they really desire.
Like all of us, Rastogi has been affected by the pandemic, and he warns of the changing market, which could have a negative effect on those who are financially stressed.
It is kind of an unprecedented event that everything is being shut down, and there's a lot of worry. As we know, people are getting a bit worried about their jobs. The forecasts are not so positive as of now. So to me, yes, going to the ground, understanding what the local demography is doing, seeing it firsthand with my own eyes is one part, but then there's a lot that you can actually leverage off other people. To me, it's not just a one-man show. It's just more about the team that you have on the ground. So the local real estate agent are the team that I actually rely on. They are the best people to know what's really going on in the local market. But in terms of the market, I think it's a very, very spatial kind of, for the lack of a better word, environment whereby the cashed-up buyers are actually taking a lot of benefit of this time. Cashed-up buyers are taking advantage of the people who are distressed about their job, and getting the deep bargains. Of course, they're not really available everywhere. We have to really go deep dive into those deals, transactions to find those deals.
But despite some vendors needing to sell at an undesirable price, it's not all bad.
I work on the win-win situation. Like, I'm not really forcing anyone to sell a property at a much lower level of desired amount. I mean, they are not forced to it. It's just we are giving an option. So we, in a way, are actually helping them to get out of the deal or out of the property. Sorry if I can say this.
Yeah.
We are actually helping them to move on with their lives, like with or without their own property. So it's not really a transaction with a gun on the head. They have all the choices. It's just that to me, it's just a lesson to my own clients and the community that actually talk about that we have to be risk aware all the time.
Yes.
We have to have the buffers. Today, we are enjoying the benefit of purchasing the distressed properties, but also it gives us a very important lesson that we don't find ourselves on the other side of the transaction when we are distressed and we have to sell out of our transactions at an undesirable pricing. So having that kind of buffer all the time, having that kind of risk buffers is a key thing.
Growing up in India and being the only son, Rastogi had a lot of pressure on his shoulders to look after and provide for his mother. And from a young age, he has challenged himself to do just that.
I grew up in a small town near Delhi. It's a city named Meerut. Have been born and brought up over there. Did my schooling. And it's a small town, but it's still not so small because it was a proximity to the metro there. That actually gave me a lot of vision that how we can, aspire to have a bit of bigger home over there. I've been brought up in a very humble, very God-fearing family. So I have always learned to do the right thing.
Rastogi made it through school and moved into higher education.
So I did all my high schooling in Meerut, and then moved to Lucknow to do my architectural engineering for 5 years. And at the age of 23, I moved to Singapore. So I was there in Singapore for about 6 years before I moved down to Australia in search of a much better lifestyle.
He made the most of his time in Singapore before considering the move to Australia.
It was more of an opportunity there. Like while I was doing my architecture engineering, I had to change my gears and I had to move to IT career. That was the kind of a flavor. Like everyone was jumping into the bandwagon of IT with the interest of making quicker money. And I jumped the bandwagon myself. I'm a self-learned programmer. I learned programming. I had a job offer of IT before I actually finished my architecture degree. And from there was no turning back. I was once working for a US-based company in Delhi, and then I got an offer to come to Singapore. So that it was my job which actually got me there. And I fell in love with the country.
But before Singapore, there was a life in India, and Rastogi had a lot of great influences to push him along his journey.
I'm actually born and brought up in a city near Delhi. So it's not really a big metro like Delhi.
Yep.
But I have always been exposed to the city like Delhi. So with regards to my childhood, like we were a small family. Like I got two siblings, like two elder sisters, but we were very close knitted with all the cousins. We spent all summer vacations together in different cities, like following each other. And it was great fun to be together. There was never a pressure of doing something in life. It was very merry-go-happy kind of thing.
Yeah.
We're just enjoying the time together. So it was the love, and I guess like that was the aspirations as well. Like my uncles have been very well off, like engineers, doctors, defense personnel. That actually helped me to think in my mind that if we do the right thing, then we can actually aspire to be leading a good life later on. Compared to my father, who actually just enjoyed the life throughout, and he gave me a good lesson that it's all about enjoying as well, like not really stressing too much and living the moment.
Rastogi's parents were the first motivators in his life for different reasons.
My father has been, as I said, like was not really very educated, so he was just chasing jobs here and there until he finally found something in which he worked for long hours, different shifts. And I think that took a toll on his health. He expired. He passed away a long time back. And that actually got me a lot of, I guess, motivation for me to think about the family, because back in India, being the only son, I had a huge responsibility on my shoulders to be able to deliver for my mother, especially. So my mother, on the other hand, very hardworking lady. She is the inspiration of my hard work behavior, or the culture that I have cultivated, because I've seen her working very hard. So the background is that she started a boutique as a tailoring shop in her household itself, and that actually took her lot many hours of her, even her parenting. So it was my elder sister who actually took care of me as a baby. So I have a huge respect for my mother and my sister.
Wow.
For that reason. And that actually has imbibed me that kind of culture, that I need to be hardworking enough to give back to other people or the community later on.
The events in Rastogi's life led him to where he is now, but it was something specific that really pushed him to move forward.
Back home in India, when you're coming from a lower middle class family, education is the key, which actually I realized early on. I was a very average, mediocre student until maybe year 10, until my uncle actually inquired, like, what's really going on in my life? What do I really want to be? And I'm really, really, very grateful to that. Maybe he doesn't really remember that anymore, but actually that made me a great impression. My one particular uncle and other aunt, they had a lot of confidence in my ability, because, like when you are the youngest in the family, you don't really care too much. You just play around. I was kind of a guy always playing cricket or flying kites in my childhood. And all of a sudden, that was a moment that I was shaken up. Like, okay, what do you mean by life? Like, I'm enjoying it. And then I realized that it's all about getting the right mindset, that if you aspire to do something, if you put a goal to something, then it's a matter of just going and achieving it. And it's the sheer hard work that can get you there. So back home, it's either you become a doctor or you become an engineer. And that's how it is over there. And it's so competitive. Like, if you really want to make punch above your weight, you have to really qualify for those kind of institutions where the seats are limited. So competition is very hard.
Rastogi stepped up and began to take on a lot of responsibility at a young age.
I was actually getting up at 4 a.m. to study, then go to the school, come back. By that time, like, mother was already running a business as a boutique. So I was actually helping her later on. I did few little things as an entrepreneur, real aspect, I guess. So my days were like, I felt that 24 hours were not enough, even while I was in year 11, year 12. The reason I choose to go for engineering in particular, I think it's because I always had a knack for numbers. One of my uncle used to always give me riddles and puzzles. As a cousin, we still live till date. Like, when we meet, like, our better halves actually get bored to death because we always talk about like puzzles and numeric riddles. And so I guess like problem solving. Then I was actually pretty good in drawing as well. Like I used to make portraits, and that's how I actually choose to become an architect. So I went for my architecture engineering, which is a 5 years degree course. And that was kind of very logical for me to get there. Like I really like the number side of it, problem solving, and using the creativity to use my use all of my creativity as in the skills holistically.
While he was still studying, Rastogi's life took a different turn.
So while I was doing architecture engineering, I realized that it will take me long years to get myself settled there in terms of supporting my family. So I moved into IT. So I self-learned programming, so IT programming. So I let go of my degree relevance of architecture, or rather choose to become a programmer, so IT programmer. So I had a job of IT before I actually finished my architecture engineering.
Oh, that's cool.
so it wasn't really cool though, because I was doing two things together at that point of time. It was hard work, but it paid off. It paid off. Like I had a job offer. Like I was really working as a full-time employee while I was doing full-time studies at the same time.
Being a self-starter, Rastogi taught himself to become a programmer. He used those same self-learning skills which he practiced in his youth to master the art of investing in the future.
I started with the programming, so I'm a self-learned programmer. I actually picked the books on databases like Oracle, books, the whole set from one of the libraries. And
good choice.
Yeah, so that was fun. Like, it was very intriguing. What I realized that there was a bit of similarities as well, like what I was doing as an architect. Like, I was putting the whole, as a concept, like how the building should be looking like, and then trying to get into the details, the finer details, eventually as a conforming components. And that's what we were doing even the IT projects then, that having a very clear understanding what the goals are of the project and what are the difficult constraints around it, whether it's the time, budget, or the constraints of the project, and then how we can work it together. And as we grew up in the career, like as I grew up, it's just a team dynamics as well. And so I was able to use my architectural skills, not necessarily at the same level of creativity, but the whole thing around putting a concept first and then delivering was something which actually I was able to use in my IT programming skills as well.
Rastogi went on to expand his skill set by enrolling in a Masters of Computer Science at the National University of Singapore.
I've been very, tuned with the idea that we need to go for a formal education at the same time. So I actually enrolled myself in one of the best universities, National University of Singapore, and I did Masters of Computer Science over there as a part-timer. So I really loved it because I was able to see not just practically what I was doing or what I was learning on my own or picking things in the project, but like how the industry is moving from the research perspective. So it was great because I was able to get exposed to a lot more large database sets and how the whole industry is moving around that.
When Rastogi got married, he and his wife started to think seriously about their future and where they would settle and continue to build their life.
While I was in 4th year of my Singapore stay, I got married as well.
Congrats.
So because it was my part-time master's that I was going through, once it was over, it was kind of a question that we really want to ask ourselves, that where do we really want to settle down? And as you would know, there's a national services that kids have to go, as in the sons have to go in Singapore. And we were like, we love the country. We are okay with the temperature and everything, given the proximity to India. But do we really want to impose that kind of restriction in our second generation? And the answer was no. And then the question was like, okay, which country from here? As a young couple, both in IT, we had all places in the world that we could have actually migrated to. So we, again, kind of a very systematic approach that we took. We worked out all the different options. We worked out what are the different criteria that we'll be looking at, what would be the weights for that. We did a bit of voting on each aspect, and then come up with a cumulative score with a weighted factor model, which I didn't really know what it was called earlier.
It's all very process-driven.
Very process-oriented. And I thank my wife for being on the same page to be able to work out in the same mentality or I guess with the same frequency. Of course, we differ or we have different opinions mostly all the time. But but the thing is that we have a congruent system that can lead us into a more systematic approach. And of course, like we value our emotions as well, but then it is just one of the other factors that we look at. And so we evaluated quite a few countries, and Australia was a winner. And we applied for offshore residency from Singapore, had no issues then. In 2005, we got approved. 2006, we were here.
Despite having no real savings to invest with, Rastogi's tenacity pushed him to make a start on his journey.
My first property was actually back home in India, in Delhi, actually.
Okay.
And once, I was never a saver, so I never saved money. Even the money that I had was actually spent on my own marriage. So I had nothing to start with. But then I realized that I have to have a plan for the future in terms of we really need to invest. But the question was there was no money to invest. So idea was that if we invest somewhere, then we will be bound to save for that. Because if there's a mortgage on our head, the mortgage money or the savings will go out of our budget first, and then we have to play around with the leftovers. So on that note, we were able to invest something back home after doing a bit of research, listening to our family and friends over there. It was good for some time, but then it didn't really work very well. I guess it didn't really stood the test of time. And so I was out of investing for some time.
Yep.
But having said that, I was still investing in shares because I have realized that it's not what I earn that matters. It also, what matters is that what my earnings can earn for me.
That's right.
So making the hard-earned money work harder for me was the key. So I was actually doing a lot of research. As you know, like I studied programming on my own. I started looking out on how do I go about investing my savings and having that kind of a mindset to save more, to invest. And so nothing happened until 2007. We were on the crossroads. Okay, should we really go for our first home in Sydney here, or what should we be looking at? And then I was like, hold on. If I go for my investment or buy my own property, then I'll be stuck in the sense that I have to value my job a lot more than otherwise. And it made me think through like what I really want in my life in terms of my career, as well as what kind of life I would like to lead along with my family.
Rastogi was faced with a personal decision, which would eventually lead him a step closer to his financial freedom.
And it came to me that IT has been more of an accidental career for me. That was a demand of the time in the country like India. But now I'm here in Sydney, in Australia, where opportunities are just all over the place. It's like, if you're good at it, there will be an opportunity for you to work on. So that prompted me to think like, what is the real essence? Like, what is my real value system? And I realized that it's the investing, making the money work harder is the key thing that I should be looking at. And that actually made me quit my job in 2007 in IT. I was actually doing a really good job here. I was working with a company called Avanade, which is a joint venture of Accenture and Microsoft. I was doing a great job over there. Loved the company, loved the job I was doing. But then I thought like, I really want to think about what I really want to do. So I quitted my job and started preparing for GMAT and went for my MBA. Wanted to go to US for my MBA as in business school.
Yeah.
But my wife was pregnant with our first child. So we had to really think through what we really want to do.
Yep.
So that made me choose to go for a local school here in Sydney, AGSM.
Oh, yes.
I'm so proud to make that decision.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was so much keen to go to US. So later on my exchange program, I chose to go to Chicago Booth Business School for my studies.
Things seemed to be heading in a good direction, but life took a turn once again.
That served me very well. And I really want to get into finance and managing money, get into investment banking. But GFC happened in 2008.
Oh, yeah.
That actually it actually put so much of pressure in terms of what should I be doing? Should I really go back to IT industry? Because now I have no job. My wife is going for a maternity leave, and we don't want to compromise on our lifestyle.
No, of course.
So that was a hard year, like 2008 or 2009, because I was very much committed to make a switch. And because of the GFC, the jobs were very hard to find, especially when I'm making a career switch. So in parallel, I started studying CFA, which is a Chartered Financial Analysis. It is a three-level program, which typically people takes 6-7 years, sometimes more. And I actually got it out in 3 years. So the preparation for that exam alone got me that credibility and then motivation that I really want to stick onto my industry of choice,
That's
which
great.
is financial investments.
Yep.
And I guess because of my sheer persistence and consistency in my efforts, I was able to land into a job in Westpac as an equities analyst.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So purely research role, and nothing to do with architecture, nothing to do with IT, but purely looking at the company's financials, making a call whether it's a good company to buy or not. And so from there, once I learned into the job, 6 months into it, I realized that, okay, what do I do now?
Rastogi spent 6 months working at Westpac as an equities analyst, and then the prospect of his children and their future entered his mind.
I was still under financial pressure. Didn't want to compromise on our first child as well, like in terms of the aspirations.
Of course. I mean, your first child is going to be something that you put a lot of love and care and, financial support towards. And, I think every parent does it as well. I remember my first child, we spent quite a lot of money, getting the best of the best if we could. Second child, different story. It's like, usually we got the first child. But you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's
exactly
the thing.
Right.
So, it's a lifestyle decision, but also we try our best for the kids that for our kids' sake as well too. So that's really, really interesting. You were in Westpac and you started, I guess, learning a little bit more about the financial side. At what stage did you decide to purchase your property in Australia? Did you buy a first home or did you start investing into property?
Yeah, so that was the thing that I was talking about. 6 months into my role, I saw that consistency of my paycheck, and I was looking at my bank balance, which was not there. And the question was like, okay, like 2010 already, and my daughter is only 2 years old now. Do I really want to buy our own property here instead of paying the rent? Do I really want to pay my mortgage? And then it stuck to me that it's very hard gig to work out the affordability, livability, and investability of one property at the same time. And that made me realize that, okay, let me pick some books. And I started reading about it. So one of my favorite books is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm sure everyone
great
might
book.
have heard of it.
Yes.
If not, go for it. If you already read it, read it one more time. And that's where I actually learned the concept of asset and liability, not from the accounting perspective, but more from the personal growth perspective. And I realized that I'm better off going for my investment as compared to my first home. Though I had nothing at that point of time in terms of my deposit for either of them, but it was more about aspiration and having a plan. Because good thing with me and my wife is like we, just like a company, like a business, people talk about the business strategy and the 5-year planning and 10 years planning. We used to talk about our own personal growth, like, okay, where do we see ourselves in the next 10 years? And that maybe in 2010, something on those lines, like we started working out, like, are we living in our own home or not? And we realized that we really want to be on the beach next to the water view property and just chasing the kids over there. So that was the aspiration that we had in 2010. And I kid you not, I am actually in Northern Beaches next to the beach.
What comes true?
So yeah, exactly. To me, it's more about where you put your mind on, you focus on, the energy flows, and law of attraction works. So I got in touch with lots of good people out there who gave me that inspiration. I started going for different seminars, and I realized that education, when it comes to the financial education, yes, I've been well educated from that point of view that, engineering, then masters in IT, and then MBA. But when it comes to personal finance, it's an entirely different story. I knew how to read accounting books or look at the growth potential of a company, but how do I put and apply those rules on me as a family is entirely different ballgame.
And I think that's the biggest difference is that a company, you have a group of people who know that they're aspiring towards that one big company goal, and they're getting paid to be there. Whereas a family, there's, a lot of personal, emotional attachments behind it. You're not all being here to be paid to be aiming to get a big house here and do that and so forth. It's all about, what does every one of us individually want as a family, as a group, and trying to achieve that. So I can totally understand. And I think the challenge we all face, in any type of families is that everyone will have different opinions. There might be one party who's more gung-ho to go and invest into property. There's another one who sort of, takes a step back and goes, oh, I'm not sure about this and that. And you just got to try and come to some kind of compromise. And it's always that, give and take.
I'm okay for someone to take a very conscious decision or lack of decision as long as it's done deliberately, as in consciously. The challenge that I find is that people have forgotten about themselves as the hero of their own life. we are just, going through and leading the life without really, it's a life which is controlling us, the things around us which is controlling us, rather than we controlling the external factors. So it has come down to the mindset thing, and the mindset is the thing that I'm talking about. Nobody can teach anyone. It's something that you live with. Of course, by coaching or mentoring, you can try to work it out, for good or worse. But that is something which is more conscious now, as compared to, getting up early in the morning, thinking through what is your plan for the day, and then leading the day is one scenario, versus we get up, okay, now it's time to do this, okay, now time to do that, not really focusing on the end goals, but rather...
Unfortunately, that's what happens a lot in life. Whenever there's something that you got to get onto, you just got to be reactive rather than be proactive. And okay, this is the goal that we're trying to achieve. This is the steps that we need to follow. And it's important to allocate time to kind of do that as well. All right. Well, what I'd like to have a chat to you a little bit more about, Rusty, is I want to find out a little bit more about, I guess, your property investing journey. You mentioned that you've got a portfolio of $5 million worth of property. How many properties do you have in that portfolio at this point in time?
I got 15.
With a portfolio that size, Rastogi has certainly seen his fair share of ups and downs during his journey. He remembers the worst moment in his investment career so far.
This is probably my third property that I was looking at. And so this was interstate property. I knew that I had to go for auction over the phone. I did all the research that I used to do. Like I'm kind of a person who would build a report first and then look at the property much more detailed and then try to work out the pricing. And that stipulated to me that this is the maximum price that I would pay for it. And so the lesson that I had, like on the day of the auction, was that I think I got too much emotionally attached to my research process that I have been practicing. And in the auction audience, there were a couple of buyers agents, like who are very well claimed, accomplished buyers agents, and I thought, like, I'm there bidding for them and bidding for the property, and they are in the game as well. So there's something that probably I don't really know. So I actually self-doubted my own research, and I went with the flow emotionally, that if they are doing it for a client, adding a price point to it versus I'm doing for myself, if they can see the value as a local agent there, maybe I'm missing out on something. And I actually ended up buying the property on the higher side of my range. But what I realized, that the kind of mindset that I had, like in auction, we have less than few seconds to react on the bid, especially when you're doing it on the phone. It's not really easy. And the lesson that I had was, like, not to get emotional about it. And so I'm still holding that property in my portfolio. But it always reminds me of the day of auction that I actually failed my own process then. Like, I paid slightly more than what I should have paid. I should have been a happy loser on that auction rather than having a winner's remorse now.
Yeah, it's interesting. And we always look back on hindsight. I think that's really, really good that you've shared that with us, because it's hard to sort of take the emotion out of it sometimes when you're looking at, especially this is your third property. It's not like, you've done 10, 15 transactions already. This is your third one. And it's, you're still looking through that process and going. So the biggest learning lesson from that one is that, instead of overpaying just slightly that you said you did, if you had just let that one go, could you have missed an opportunity? Because, potentially, isn't that, with that property that you currently hold, is that actually a good property in your portfolio, or is it still sort of, sitting, I guess, flat at this point in time?
The property has not really done too bad, but to your point, like when I'm saying yes to our property, actually I'm saying no to other 10,000 properties as well. So it's not so much so about me saying yes to our property, but more about losing on the other 9,000, 99,900 properties out there.
Yeah, so it's the opportunity
so it's more,
cost.
To me, it's more about the opportunity cost. And it's not so much so about the property that I was talking about as my worst decision. It was more about me having a process and not following it till the end.
Yeah.
I should have walked away at a percentage, because I always look for the bargains. Like if there's a property for me at, say, maybe 93 cents in a dollar or 94 cents in a dollar, I'm not really happy when I'm getting it at 97 cents in a dollar kind of thing. So that's where I'm coming from. Like I actually overpaid to my liking. Of course, still under the market value from my own research. But it just, I guess, went through with the flow on that day, which I still remember very vividly.
There are many moments like this one in Rastogi's journey where he remembers vividly, including his aha moment where seeing the value in the renovation strategy struck a chord in him, and everything seemed to click into place.
So I would talk about maybe my fifth property purchase. So I did all the due diligence on a property which was unloved, demanding for TLC as in tender love care. It was a deceased state, I should say, sorry. It's a deceased state property in Central Coast. And what I realized that like I was actually a graduate of Sherry Barber, who talks about renovation. And what I learned from that course was unless until you do get your hand dirty, as in roll up your sleeve and do things on your own, it's hard to learn things just by reading or, like on the research. So you have to be on the ground, do the things. And that actually led me to go into unrenovated property that I can probably go and do my renovation. And the aha moment that was that I was able to see the value from the strategy that I was trying to deploy that other bidders were not really thinking about. And what I realized that it's the value for me that matters, that would actually define the maximum price I should be able to pay for the property. As compared to what market is doing, they might be on the wrong side of the equation, but it's their strategy, it's their perception of the value. I need to think about my own value add or the value perception, and then pay the price accordingly. Because value is what you get and price what you pay. So if there is enough discount from that perspective, whatever threshold I would like to have, I'm more than happy to go. Sometimes that number could be a lot more higher than what the market is really able to pay. So in that scenario, I'm happy to pay over the market price just to win the property, because I see the potential, I see the value that it will bring to me in my portfolio.
Gotcha. That's really interesting. So I guess every deal is going to be different, because I'm also thinking this through as well. I've just been recently having a conversation with another colleague who is actually looking at different deals. And he told me that, other people were coming into this particular deal in New South Wales, actually in Sydney, where every time people were looking at it, they'd make a loss on it because there was no way that the structure could be made profitable, this particular deal. But then when he came in and structured it slightly differently, he actually returned a very, very profitable rate of return from the rental income, and on top of that, the equity value after doing a certain renovation. So I guess everybody comes in a slightly different perspective, and I think a lot of people just don't really look at different angles. They probably just look at one angle and go, okay, what's the rental income? What is the equity that we can potentially gain? Whereas sometimes, you might be able to look at the particular property, like particularly for development. I can talk from personal experience, is that if you look at a particular deal, there's so many different ways you can chop up the block, you can build this, you can do this and that. And, with so many different potential opportunities, you just got to work out which one is going to be the best one. And it sounds like that's what you did with the particular property that you purchased on your fifth one. And that's, I guess, obviously what's going to work, because if you don't have a plan or a goal and you don't know which direction you head, it's very easy just to jump in and just buy any random property.
No, exactly right. And just to add on to that point is, like, I don't really think or take a property just in isolation. To me, it's like just like what I was doing in my share portfolio for my clients, is that what would that additional stock will do in my portfolio has a lot more weightage, because it is not just about the return profile, but it's also about the risk profile. So to me, from the financial matrix of risk-adjusted return is the thing that I'm looking at. And that actually defines the mandate that what should be my next property be looking like. So I have a mandate, I have a strategy in place first that will define and guide me the mandate for my next purchase. And then that has a more value for me from the strategy or from the portfolio perspective. And if, having said that, I'm not really saying yes or no to other properties which doesn't really lie in that same realm. It's just that I would be looking for a lot more discount for me to get excited about that opportunity.
Rastogi shares with us the strategy he used to build his portfolio of $5 million worth of property.
What I learned early on in my investing career was that we have to really make banks our friends. Yes, capital growth matters because that is actually going to make us rich. But we can't really chase capital growth all the time because there will be some ceiling hits through the journey. So we have to be very mindful of what banks can lend us to, as in terms of what would be our serviceability to them. So the combination of having the right cash flow to suit the bank's criteria, as well as the capital growth as a combination, is what I actually look at to proceed. So when I was buying my fourth property, I think my broker told me that this is the last property, Rusty. Don't bother about the fifth property. But when I did the same thing for the fifth property, I was like, okay, one more property, last one. And then probably I was told the same thing on my 15th property, but this is the last one. It was my strategy that I have to stop after 15 properties. So I actually gained 15th property 3 years ago. So it's just like following my strategy, nothing more.
Yeah, okay.
So two things, cash flow and capital growth, are important. To me, the other thing, which is equity in the place, is also very important, like how much discount I'm getting, because that will actually deleverage my portfolio.
Gotcha.
So having a combination of the three is the key thing from my perspective.
So in order to be able to, I guess, grow and to increase your portfolio, were you basically leapfrogging by pulling out the equity from each property that gained to be able to invest into the next one? And with the cash flow, that was funding the portfolio to service the properties that you had. That was basically how you were able to grow it like that?
Yeah, exactly right. So to me, it was more about having the right strategy first, then having the right location, and then the right property. Price, what we pay, is very beyond tertiary actually. Because now if I look back on few of my purchases, like that property which I bought at about 400,000 4 years ago, now it is rated as like valued at about 620. Now, am I really worried about whether I paid 10,000 more or less the other, like when I was purchasing? Not. So the idea is that as long as it's in the growth zone, something that would actually help me get my equity back immediately, that I can reuse it for my next purchase, has been the things that I've been looking at. But having the corner of the eye, looking at the long-term growth potential as well, because it's not just about growing the portfolio. I have to also be conscious of the later stages of consolidation and wrapping it up. So having a strategy overall for the whole portfolio is the key thing as well.
Rastogi began to feel the benefits of previous investments, and it resonated with him how important it was to keep the momentum up moving forward.
So my biggest why has been generating the wealth and making that kind of money that I was earning actively in my job. I mean, it was a great dream role that I was working on. I was managing portfolio in tune of $2 billion. And what I realized that I was actually getting more rewarded for the decisions that I made a few years ago. And I realized that generating of the wealth passively has actually opened up my, I guess, constraints around time and energy and money, that I can choose to pursue my own passions. And that has been my why, that I'm actually helping other people, my clients, to think about their own reason or think about their constraint and how they can get away from them so that they can lead the life they desire themselves.
Rastogi has mentioned already that his journey was heavily influenced by reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad and by listening to Sharif Barber talking through renovations. Who else along the way has impacted his investment journey and strategies?
I think there are so many gurus out there, so many experts out there, but at the end of the day, it's more about the holistic approach. Because when I went to Bob Anderson course, or Jason and Amy, who are another group of property developers, they have a theory. They have worked out the way of how to do things. But I think education is not enough unless until you take action. So there are things around mindset as well. So I've actually gone to the programs like Tony Robbins, who talks about taking action, thinking about what's your why, and pivoting, as you said earlier. So direct answer is that I've actually gone to so many experts, Bob Anderson, Sherry Barber, Dominic, Dimfna Behold, even my colleagues, like people whom I actually worked with. Like the good thing about all these networks is that it has exposed me to other fellow investors and developers. And to me, they're more approachable. We can learn from each other's mistakes. I still go out for so many socials, and everyone has something to share and a lot more for me to learn on a daily basis. I'm learning even now on a daily basis, like what's really going on. And there are heaps of information out there, but as long as you can put it together as more qualified, that's where the key is, and taking action is the bigger thing than that.
Every serious investor practices certain habits and routines which contribute to their success, and Rastogi is no different.
Meditation is the key thing, I would think. That actually talking to self, as in reflecting back on how maybe the year has gone, or the month has gone, or the day has gone, and how do you plan for your future? Like, how do you plan for your next 10 years? Then having some milestones on the way, and thinking about the end goal, like thinking about your obituary on your own, like on your deathbed, what do you want people to talk about? So just that kind of a mindset, and also thinking that you are more in control of the world around you, of the circumstances. So you, as in one, has to have control of the emotions, not really being reactive to it, but rather having the self-belief that we are not, I mean, it's just a glass, whether is half full or half empty. To me, it's always fully, it's a full all the time. So having that kind of mindset, the feeling of abundance and giving back to the community, personally has given me a lot more, I guess, the confidence and the kick that I need to do more, because I've achieved for myself, for my family, but now it's more about increasing my circle of influence. And that's the reason why I've actually chosen to start my own Get Rare Properties as a business, so that I can reach out, help them out to achieve what they are looking for.
We find out what advice Rastogi would give to his younger self if he met himself 10 years ago.
I would say, like, just keep chuckling, because I think there's not, like, I'm not really much different from who am I today versus what I was 10 years ago. It's just that having that kind of clarity, a much more clarity with confidence is the thing. Like the small little habits, like it's what we say is that it's 1 degree consistently, persistently will get you a lot more ahead of the curve. So things goes exponentially, but as long as you're consistent and persistent, have faith in the system and the process, then it's a matter of just going through. Having said that, the only thing I would say is have a coach, have a mentor, learn from them directly. You don't really have to look back and tell yourself things. As you said, in hindsight, it's easy to say something, but when we actually approach a mentor or coach, we are actually accessing their network as well as their wisdom, as well as their experience and exposure in no time.
Thank you to Vaibhav Rastogi, our guest on this episode of Property Investory. If you want to hear more about his journey and get a copy of the show notes on the website, head over to propertyinvestory.com/notes. The show notes will give you the inside scoop on the little gold nuggets of wisdom all our guests share from their backstory and all their overall strategies and philosophies. Plus, you'll get a copy of the advice broken down and shared in a quick and easy to consume format. Just head over to propertyinvestory.com/notes and download it today. Thanks for listening.